I think Austrian economics is just what economics would be if we hadn't had the catastrophe of government money to try and distort economics in order to justify inflation to the benefit of special interests, banks, and governments. It's just Austrian economics as it existed up until the early 20th century, and as it continued, is what the world of economics would have been without the distortion that is fiat, without government distortion of the economy. So the main value proposition is that it's not advertisement for inflation. I think this is what I would say. Like the rest of the economics is just if you read Keynesian economics, if you start with the idea that this is all just motivated reasoning to arrive at the conclusion that inflation is actually good for you, then it all makes sense. And this is how I used to teach Keynesian economics at university. I tell my students, look, this entire textbook is a very elaborate joke, a very elaborate hoax to try and get you to believe that money printing is the answer. So if you're taking the exam and you don't know what the answer is, you don't understand the question, just go with money printing, because that's what they want you to arrive at. That's always the answer. So Keynesian economics is just arrived at how to justify inflation, how to make inflation acceptable for people. Austrian economics is just the application of human mental capacities toward understanding problems of economics. So I think it's a much more powerful tool and much more reality based and much better as a way of understanding the world. Sure, it's not most likely to get you success if you're in the fiat educational system. But I think something very important has happened in the last 2 years in terms of the inflation. Up until 2019, the average Keynesian economist and the average kind of, let's say, high salary person working within the fiat system was able to beat inflation, between the, or at least was able to beat inflation in their own mind. They look at inflation as being the CPI, and they looked at their stock portfolio beating the CPI. And so they thought, oh, well, inflation is a good thing. It's what makes my stock portfolio go up. And they could fool themselves into believing the ridiculous Keynesian idea that it's inflation that gives us economic growth. 2020 to 2022, I think that's changed drastically. And I think a lot of people are going to revisit those things, because what you see over the last 2 years is, the stocks and bonds are crashing, while at the same time the value of money is declining. So basically, a lot of people that would have usually been the beneficiaries of the fiat system, or at least in their mind they think the fiat system is working for them, have gotten massively hurt over the last couple of years. And looking at the way that things are working politically, I don't think there's any real scope of things improving. I think we're going to get more inflation, and we're going to get more currency destruction, and we're going to get more gaslighting about the solution for inflation being for you to go back to living like a 13th century peasant, not for central banks to stop printing money. This is, I think, the real fiat idea. This is the point that I'm trying to get at from writing the book, The Fiat Standard, that the way that the inflation manifests is through all of these idiots telling you that you're going to boil the oceans and burn the earth unless you live like a 13th century peasant. If you eat meat, if you consume oil, if you own a car, if you live like a 20th century, 19th century civilized human being, you're going to ruin the weather for all of us. And so you need to go back to poverty. This is what inflation is. And I'm just going to keep beating that drum, because I think it's true. I think it was easier for the fiaters to hide this before 2020, but I think we've crossed the Rubicon in 2020, and I think we've gotten into a world where even the apologists for the regime need to start thinking about their own interest, because I don't think the regime is going to work for the vast majority of people now.